The cabin doors were preparing to close on Trans-American Flight 417, and senior flight attendant Karen Miller was on a power trip. When she saw Dr. Immani Hayes, a black woman in business class, quietly filming an interaction, she pounced. She scolded her, threatened her, and demanded she delete the footage. When Immani refused, Karen had the captain called, and the passenger was dragged off the plane in front of everyone. What the flight attendant didn't know, the woman she just humiliated wasn't a tourist. She was a senior investigator for the Department of Justice, and she had just found her next case. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, was a special kind of purgatory. It wasn't just the noise, a constant, dull roar of human migration. It was the smell, a sharp blend of jet fuel, stale coffee, and the faint, anxious sweat of thousands of people trying to be somewhere else. Dr. Immani Hayes sat in the crowded terminal for Trans-American Airways Flight 417 to Seattle. Gate 77A was a microcosm of the airport's chaos. People hovered near the boarding lanes like nervous birds, clutching passports and flimsy boarding passes. Immani, by contrast, was an island of stillness. She sat with her leather briefcase at her feet and a bottle of water in her hand, her eyes scanning the room not out of anxiety, but out of habit. Immani was an observer. It was her job. As a senior trial attorney for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, she didn't just see people. She saw patterns. She saw the gate agent, a flustered man named Mark Jenkins, give a warm, "Right this way, sir," to a white man in a rumpled suit, only to sigh with theatrical impatience at the elderly Hispanic couple who followed him, scrutinizing their passports for just a beat too long. She saw the casual way a group of college-age white men were allowed to crowd the Group 1 lane, laughing and shoving, while a black family with a stroller was curtly told, "Family boarding hasn't started. Please step aside." These were the paper cuts of a life she knew all too well. They were the 1,000 tiny insults that built a mountain of systemic bias. Her case in Seattle was a big one, a class action lawsuit against a tech giant for discriminatory hiring algorithms. She was flying in to lead the final depositions. She was tired. The flight was just a conveyance, a necessary box to sit in for 2.5 hours. She was in business class, seat 2B, a small mercy afforded by the government's travel rates. "We are now pre-boarding those passengers needing special assistance in active duty military," Mark Jenkins announced, his voice tinny over the PA. Immani watched as the elderly Hispanic couple she'd noticed earlier, Arturo and Sofia Ramirez, she'd heard them call each other, approached the desk. They were small, neat, and clearly nervous about flying. Mr. Ramirez held both their boarding passes in a slightly trembling hand. They were motioned through, and they began the slow walk down the jet bridge. A moment later, the agent called for Group 1, which included business class. Immani stood, her joints protesting mildly, and slipped her phone into her jacket pocket. She slung her briefcase over one shoulder and joined the short queue. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant stood with a smile that was more of a baring of teeth. She was in her late 50s, with impeccable blonde hair sprayed into a helmet and a name tag that read, Karen Miller, Senior Purser. When Immani handed her the boarding pass, Karen's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan, from Immani's professional but simple black pantsuit to her natural hair, pulled back in a neat twist. It was a look Immani had received 1,000 times. It said, "You? In business class? Are you sure?" "2B, Karen said, her voice a full octave higher and colder than it had been for the white man in front of her. "To your left." Immani simply nodded. "Thank you," and stepped onto the aircraft. The recycled air, cool and sterile, hit her face. She found her seat, a comfortable pod by the window, and settled in. She meticulously stowed her briefcase under the seat in front of her, checked for the safety card, and buckled her seatbelt. Another flight attendant, much younger, with a Sarah Chen name tag, offered her a pre-departure beverage. "Ma'am, water, orange juice, or champagne?" "Just water, please." "Thank you, Sarah," Immani said with a small, genuine smile. Sarah returned it, looking slightly relieved, as if kindness was a rarity. From the front of the cabin, Immani could hear Karen Miller greeting other passengers. "Mr. Stevens, so wonderful to have you back with us," she gushed at a man in a loud, pinstripe suit who had just boarded. Karen, good to see you, doll. The man Chad Stevens boomed. I hope the bubbles are cold. Only the best for you, Mr. Stevens, Karen chirped. I'll bring it right over. Immani sighed and looked out the window, watching the ground crew load baggage. She just wanted to get to Seattle. Boarding continued. The economy cabin was filling up, a steady stream of people shuffling past the business class curtain. The overhead bins were becoming a point of contention. Then Immani heard a commotion from the galley area, near the aircraft door. It was Karen Miller's voice, sharp and laced with impatience. Sir, that bag is not going to fit. You can't bring that on. Immani leaned forward slightly. It was Mr. Ramirez. He was standing in the aisle looking confused, holding a standard soft-sided black carry-on. His wife, Sophia, stood behind him, looking mortified. Pero, it is the size, Mr. Ramirez said, his accent thick. At the gate, they say okay. Well, the gate agent was wrong, Karen snapped. This bin is full, and that bag is clearly oversized. You people never listen to the size requirements. Now you're holding up the entire plane. You people. The phrase hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Immani's entire body tensed. She looked at the bag. It was a standard rollaboard, the kind she'd seen dozens of other passengers carry on without issue. It was soft-sided. It would have easily compressed into a space if needed. Furthermore, the bin directly above Mr. Ramirez's head was, in fact, half empty. I can make it fit, Mr. Ramirez said, distressed. He tried to lift it, but his hands were shaking. No, don't touch that. You'll injure yourself or someone else, Karen said, swatting his hand away. Give it to me. She grabbed the bag, her face a mask of fury, and marched to the front. Sarah, tag this. It's going to have to be gate checked. You two, she pointed at the Ramirez's, go to your seats, 24D and E. Move along. Mrs. Ramirez was blinking back tears. Her husband, defeated, put his arm around her, and they began the long, shuffling walk of shame down the aisle. Immani felt a cold, familiar anger rise in her chest. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was a targeted humiliation. It was a power play against two people who were elderly, spoke English as a second language, and were in no position to fight back. Quietly, instinctively, Immani slipped her hand into her jacket pocket. She pulled out her phone. Keeping it low, angled from her lap, she pressed the record button. She didn't point it directly at Karen, but angled it toward the galley in the aisle, capturing the audio clearly and the general motion of the cabin. Karen returned to the front galley, muttering to Sarah Chen. I swear, I don't know how they even get through security. Can't follow a simple rule. Now I've got to call the ground crew back for one stupid bag. Sarah just nodded, her face pale, avoiding eye contact. Immani kept the phone recording. She panned it slightly, capturing Karen's disgusted expression as she spoke to Sarah. Then she captured the stark contrast as Karen turned her attention to Chad Stevens in 1A. Here you are, Mr. Stevens. A fresh bottle just for you, Karen said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness as she poured him a glass of champagne. You're a lifesaver, Karen. These flights would be unbearable without you, Chad replied, winking. Immani recorded for another 30 seconds, capturing the fawning interaction, the blatant night-and-day difference in treatment. This was it. This was the pattern in action. This was the kind of evidence that was so hard to capture. The subtle, pervasive bias that companies denied until they were blue in the face. She had no grand plan for the video. Maybe it would be an exhibit in a training manual. Maybe she'd send it to the Trans-American General Counsel. For now, it was just data. She stopped the recording and was about to slip the phone back into her pocket when she looked up. Karen Miller was staring directly at her. Her eyes were slits. The plastic smile was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. She had seen the phone. Karen strode the few steps from the galley to Immani's seat. She leaned down, planting one hand on the armrest of the seat opposite Immani, invading her space. Excuse me, ma'am, she said, her voice dangerously low and controlled. Yes, Immani replied, her own voice perfectly level. What were you doing with that phone? I was just using my phone, Immani said, non-committal. No, Karen hissed. I saw you. You were pointing it this way. You were filming me. The accusation hung in the enclosed space of the business class cabin. The other passengers, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, paused their pre-flight rituals. Chad Stevens lowered his Wall Street Journal. The woman across the aisle in 2C put down her tablet. "Ma'am, I am a passenger in my assigned seat," Immani said, her voice remaining calm and low. She refused to be drawn into a public spectacle. "You were recording me and my crew," Karen repeated, her voice rising in volume. She was no longer leaning in. She was standing tall, asserting her authority for the entire cabin to see. "That is against Trans-American Airways policy, and it is a violation of federal regulations. It's a security risk." Immani knew this was, at best, a gross misrepresentation. While airlines discourage filming crew, there was no FAA regulation blanket banning it, especially when it wasn't interfering with a safety-critical duty. "I'm not aware of any such regulation," Immani stated calmly, "but I'd be happy to discuss your airline's policy with you privately, perhaps after we land." This was the wrong thing to say. To Karen Miller, this was not a suggestion. It was a challenge. It was a rejection of her absolute authority within the metal tube. She, a senior purser with 25 years of service, was being questioned by this woman in 2B. "No, we're not going to discuss it later," Karen snapped. Her face was flushing a blotchy red. "You are going to show me your phone, and you are going to delete that footage right now." The demand was so audacious, so illegal, that Immani almost laughed. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Give me the phone." Karen's hand was out, palm up, demanding. "You have no right to record me. It's an invasion of my privacy." "Ms. Miller," Immani said, her patience evaporating, replaced by the cold precision of a federal lawyer. "You are a customer-facing employee in public view while performing your duties. You have no reasonable expectation of privacy. I will not be giving you my phone, and I will not be deleting anything. That is my private property." Karen's eyes widened. She was trembling with rage. "You're refusing to comply with a crew member's instruction? I am refusing an unlawful demand. They are not the same thing." I feel threatened," Karen suddenly announced, her voice cracking with theatrical fear. "This passenger is aggressive and refusing to follow instructions. She's a security risk." Chad Stevens in 1A let out an annoyed huff. "Oh, for God's sake, just delete the video, lady. We all want to get home. Stop making trouble." Immani ignored him. She looked directly at Karen. "I am sitting in my seat. I am buckled in. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened you. You are the one harassing me. Now, I would appreciate it if you would return to your duties and prepare the cabin for departure." Karen looked as if Immani had slapped her. The sheer, unadulterated gall of this passenger. She had been defied. She had been embarrassed. She straightened up, her uniform jacket pulling tight across her shoulders. "That's it," she said, her voice dripping with venomous triumph. "That is your last chance. You are a non-compliant passenger." She turned on her heel and marched, not to the galley but to the front of the plane, and knocked sharply on the cockpit door. It opened a crack, and she slipped inside. The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the auxiliary power. Sarah Chen, the junior flight attendant, was frozen in the galley, her eyes wide with terror. She looked at Immani, a silent, desperate apology in her gaze. Immani simply sat. She picked up her bottle of water and took a slow, deliberate sip. She unlocked her phone, opened her email, and sent the video file to her personal, encrypted cloud server. She then sent a text message to her boss, Daniel Foster, in Washington, D.C. "Daniel, Flight TAA 417 LAXC, maybe a delay. I am being threatened with removal from the flight by crew after documenting potential Title VI violations against other passengers. Will update." She put the phone screen down on her lap. She waited. The ball was in their court now. She had done nothing wrong, and she would not be bullied. The sense of calm that settled over her was not passive. It was the practiced, icy calm of someone who knew the law, knew her rights, and knew with absolute certainty that her opponent had just made a catastrophic error. The cockpit door opened. Karen Miller emerged, followed by a tall man in a crisp white pilot's uniform, his gold epaulets gleaming. He had a stern, weathered face and a look of profound annoyance. This was Captain Robert Cole, and he did not look happy. Captain Robert Cole strode down the aisle with the heavy, confident steps of a man who was, In his mind, the unassailable king of his domain. The aircraft was his ship. His word was law. He stopped next to Immani's seat, forcing her to crane her neck to look up at him. Karen Miller stood just behind his shoulder, a look of vindicated spite on her face. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Cole," he said, his voice a low baritone that didn't invite discussion. "My senior purser informs me that you are refusing to follow crew instructions, that you are illegally recording my staff, and that you have become aggressive. Is that true?" His tone was not one of inquiry. It was one of confirmation. The verdict had already been rendered. Immani met his gaze. "Captain, I am Dr. Immani Hayes. Your purser is mistaken. I am a ticketed passenger, sitting quietly in my seat. Your purser, Miss Miller, verbally abused two elderly passengers, publicly shaming them and making discriminatory remarks." "That is a lie," Karen interjected. "She's lying, Captain." Immani held up a hand, not to Karen, but to the captain. "I am speaking to the captain, Miss Miller. Please do not interrupt." The captain's eyes narrowed. "You'll address my crew with respect, ma'am." "Respect is earned, Captain," Immani said, her voice still level. "I simply documented her behavior. At that point, Ms. Miller came to my seat, invaded my personal space, harassed me, and unlawfully demanded that I surrender my private property. When I declined, she falsely accused me of being a security risk. I am not a security risk. I am a passenger who witnessed misconduct." Captain Cole listened to this, his expression unchanging. He had been flying for 30 years. He had dealt with every kind of problem passenger imaginable. To him, this was simple. A passenger was arguing with his crew. His crew was, by default, right. The passenger was, by default, wrong. The plane was late. "Ma'am, I don't care about the he said, she said." "I am not a courtroom," he said dismissively. "What I care about is the safety and security of this flight. My purser gave you a lawful instruction. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. You must comply. You are creating a disturbance. Either you show Ms. Miller that you have deleted that video and you stow your phone now, or you will be removed from my aircraft." The ultimatum was stark. The entire cabin was wrapped. Immani took a slow breath. This was the critical moment. This was the point of no return. "Captain Cole," she said, speaking with the deliberate clarity of a lawyer addressing a hostile judge. "Let me be perfectly clear, so there are no misunderstandings. Are you the captain in command ordering me to destroy private data, my personal property, under the threat of removing me from a flight I have paid for?" "I am ordering you to comply with my purser's safety instruction," he retorted, skillfully avoiding her phrasing. "Delete the video. Put the phone away. This is your final warning." "And let me be clear again," Immani replied, her voice hardening. "The instruction is not lawful, and I will not be complying. I will not be destroying evidence of your crew's misconduct. If you choose to remove me, you will be doing so in full knowledge that I am a non-threatening, compliant passenger in my assigned seat, and I am not, nor have I ever been, a security threat." A flicker of doubt crossed the captain's face. Her language was precise, calculated. This was not the usual hysterical passenger. But he was in too deep. His authority had been publicly challenged. Karen Miller was staring at him, expecting him to back her. He looked past Immani to Karen. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Call ground security, get her off." Karen Miller's face lit up with a sickening, triumphant smile. "Right away, Captain." She hurried to the galley to make the call. Captain Cole looked back down at Immani. "You've made your choice, ma'am. We'll have security here in a minute. Please be prepared to deplane." He turned and walked back to the cockpit without another word. The door clicked shut. A low murmur rippled through the plane. Chad Stevens in 1A scoffed. "About time. Some people just need to be the center of attention." The woman in 2C just stared, her mouth slightly open, before nervously looking away, as if afraid to be associated. Immani felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a sharp, cold focus. This was no longer an inconvenience. It was an incident. It was a case. She methodically began to pack her things. She unplugged her earbuds, carefully winding the cord. She zipped her briefcase. She took another sip of water. She was not going to be rushed. She was not going to be flustered. They wanted to make a scene. They would be the only ones performing. After 5 long, agonizingly silent minutes, the aircraft door opened. 2 airport police officers boarded, followed by the gate agent, Mark Jenkins, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. The first officer, a large man with a name tag that read Officer Riley, approached her seat. "Ma'am, Dr. Hayes, we're going to have to ask you to come with us." Immani stood. She picked up her briefcase. She looked at the officers, at Mark Jenkins, and then at the other passengers who were all staring, phones now discreetly out, recording this part of the encounter. "Just so you are both aware, officer," Immani said clearly, "I am a ticketed passenger being removed under false pretenses. I am not a threat, I am not aggressive, and I am complying with your request to deplane. I am doing so under protest." Officer Riley just nodded, his face impassive. "Understood, ma'am. Let's just go." Immani Hayes began the walk of shame. She moved past the galley, where Karen Miller stood, arms crossed, a smug smirk plastered on her face. She stepped into the jet bridge, the officers in front and behind her. The stale air of the terminal hit her. This was not how her day was supposed to go. On the jet bridge, the transition from the cool, quiet cabin to the echoing industrial tunnel was jarring. Immani walked steadily, her heels clicking on the metal floor. Officer Riley, his partner Officer Chen, and the hapless gate agent Mark Jenkins flanked her. At the end of the jet bridge, just before the doors to the terminal, Immani stopped. The officers, surprised by the sudden halt, stopped with her. "Ma'am, we need to keep moving," Officer Riley said, his hand gesturing vaguely toward the gate. "In a moment," Immani said. Her voice was no longer that of a passenger. It was flat, cold, and heavy, with an authority that had, until this moment, been deliberately sheathed. "Before we go any further, I will need both of your names and badge numbers." Officer Riley sighed. "Ma'am, you're not under arrest. You're just being deplaned. We can discuss this back at the gate." "We will discuss it now," Immani commanded. "I am a U.S. citizen who has just been illegally ejected from a common carrier. I am entitled to the names of the officers involved. Or do I need to file a formal complaint to get them?" Officer Riley and Officer Chen exchanged a look. This was getting complicated. "Riley 7492, the first officer said. "Chen 8113, said his partner. "Thank you." Immani noted them in her phone. Then she turned her head back toward the aircraft door, where Karen Miller was still standing, watching the show, her arms still crossed. "And you," Immani called out, "I need your full name, and the name of your captain." Karen's smugness wavered. She was being called out. "It's Ms. Miller and the captain is Robert Cole, and you won't be needing it. You're banned from Trans-American." "Oh, I will be needing it," Immani said, a dangerous calm settling into her voice. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, turning to the gate agent, who flinched. "This aircraft is not to depart. Not yet." I can't do that," Mark stammered. "The captain is the one. I just work the gate. You will call your station manager, and you will tell him to hold this plane, because this jet bridge is now the site of an active investigation." This was a language the police officers understood. "Ma'am, what investigation?" Officer Riley asked, his hand drifting toward his utility belt. Immani looked him in the eye. "An investigation into civil rights violations, conspiracy, and unlawful ejection." She reached into her briefcase, unzipped the main compartment, and pulled out a slim black leather portfolio. It was embossed with a subtle official seal. She flipped it open. She first presented her credentials to Officer Riley. He took a step back, as if she'd pulled out a weapon. His eyes went wide. He read the card, then read it again. He nudged his partner, who leaned in and swore under his breath. Immani then turned, walked the few steps back to the aircraft door, and held the credentials up for Karen Miller to see. Karen squinted, confused. Then her eyes focused. She read the words engraved in gold text. "United States Department of Justice, Dr. Immani M. Hayes, Senior Trial Attorney, Civil Rights Division." Karen Miller's face, which had been a mask of smug triumph, did not just go pale, it crumpled. The blood drained from it so fast she looked gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her crossed arms fell limp at her sides. "Ms. Miller," Immani said, her voice echoing slightly in the jet bridge. You just harassed, threatened, and then filed a false security report against a federal officer. That officer, she continued, was in the process of documenting your violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 against Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez. You then conspired with your captain to have me, a witness, illegally removed from this flight in retaliation. I didn't know, Karen stammered, her voice a tiny, terrified squeak. Of course you didn't know, Immani said, snapping the portfolio shut. That's the entire problem. You saw a black woman, and you assumed I was a threat. You saw two elderly Hispanic passengers, and you assumed you could humiliate them. You have made a grievous, career-ending error. Immani turned back to the stunned police officers. Officer Riley, I need you to ensure that this jet bridge is secured. I also need you to inform airport operations that all CCTV footage from Gate 77A and this jet bridge for the last hour is to be preserved as federal evidence. Do you understand? Officer Riley, now standing ramrod straight, nodded. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. Mr. Jenkins, Immani said to the ashen-faced gate agent, you are going to get your station manager, Mr. David Roth, I believe, on the phone. You're going to tell him to come to this gate immediately. And then, she added, you are going to book me on the next available flight to Seattle, in first class, on any airline but this one. Immani stepped past them into the terminal. She took a deep breath of the chaotic, dirty, wonderful terminal air. Her phone was already ringing. It was her boss, Daniel Foster. She answered, Daniel, yeah, you're not going to believe this. The area around Gate 77A became a bubble of pressurized silence and frantic, whispered activity. The normal chaotic din of LAX seemed to fade, replaced by the sharp, localized tension of an incident in progress. Passengers from other gates, sensing the drama, slowed their walk, staring. Inside the aircraft, the passengers of Flight 417 were growing mutinous. They had been on the tarmac for an extra 20 minutes, and now through the windows, they could see the woman who was kicked off, Dr. Hayes, standing on the jet bridge, flanked by the very officers who had removed her. And she wasn't in handcuffs. She was talking. Mark Jenkins, the gate agent, was plastered against the terminal wall, his phone clutched to his ear so tightly his knuckles were white. His voice was a high, thin squeak. Mr. Roth, I am not kidding, sir, he whispered, his eyes wide as saucers, fixed on Immani. Her badge, it said, Department of Justice, Civil Rights. She said we're holding the plane for a federal investigation. Yes, federal. Please, David, just get here. On the jet bridge, Officer Riley and Officer Chen stood at a respectful parade rest. Their entire demeanor shifted. They were no longer airport cops dealing with a difficult passenger. They were local law enforcement providing scene support for a federal officer. Their authority had been seamlessly and completely co-opted. Inside the aircraft, the cockpit door burst open, and Captain Robert Cole emerged, his face a mask of thunder. He had been stewing in his metal box, his departure slot ticking away, his authority flouted. He stomped from the galley onto the jet bridge, his polished black shoes hammering the metal. What in the living hell is going on out here, he boomed, his voice accustomed to being the loudest and most important in any room. He jabbed a thick finger first at Officer Riley, then at Mark Jenkins. I ordered that passenger removed 10 minutes ago. Why haven't we pushed back? Why are you holding up my aircraft, Jenkins? Get these people out of my jet bridge. Karen Miller, who had been cowering near the aircraft door, saw her captain and felt a small, desperate surge of hope. He would fix this. He always did. Immani Hayes, who had been calmly dictating a text, looked up from her phone. She turned, her movements unhurried, and faced the captain. They're on my jet bridge, Captain, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his bluster like a diamond cuts glass. And you haven't pushed back because your aircraft, its crew, and you yourself are party to a federal inquiry. This plane is not going anywhere. Captain Cole's face contorted in disbelief. The sheer audacity. This woman, the source of his entire delay, was still here, still talking. You have no authority here. I am the captain of this aircraft. I want you arrested for trespassing and interfering with a flight crew, he bellowed, turning to Officer Riley. Officer, do your job. Get this woman out of here. Officer Riley didn't move. He just looked almost apologetically at Immani. Immani took one slow step toward the captain. You're right about one thing. You were the captain. But your authority ended the moment you conspired to remove a federal witness from your plane based on a false security report. A what? Cole sputtered, a short, incredulous laugh escaping him. Who the hell do you think you are? Some kind of airport lawyer? You're delusional. No, Captain, Immani said. She reached into her briefcase, not for her phone, but for the black leather portfolio. She didn't just flash it. She opened it and held it steady, 2 feet from his face, forcing him to read every engraved gold leaf letter. United States Department of Justice, Dr. Immani M. Hayes, Senior Trial Attorney, Civil Rights Division. Captain Cole's rant died in his throat. He physically recoiled, as if the badge were hot. His eyes scanned the credentials, once, twice, 3 times. The blood drained from his face, leaving a sickly, mottled gray. The 30 years of unshakable authority, the God in the cockpit complex, shattered in an instant. He wasn't looking at a difficult passenger. He was looking at the U.S. government. He stammered, his mind struggling to compute the catastrophic miscalculation. This is a mistake. You didn't say... Say what, Captain? Immani pressed, her voice mercilessly calm. That I was a federal attorney? I'm not required to. That I had rights? I asserted those. That I was black? That was self-evident. And that was the only piece of information you and Miss Miller needed to make your decision, wasn't it? Before Cole could formulate a single coherent thought, a new player burst onto the scene. A short, rail-thin man in an expensive but now rumpled suit came sprinting down the terminal, his tie flying over his shoulder. He skidded to a halt at the gate, breathing heavily, his eyes wild with panic. I'm David Roth. I'm the station manager, he panted, pushing his way onto the jet bridge. He ignored his crew. He ignored the police. He made a direct line for Immani, his hands raised in a gesture of placation, a rictus of a smile on his face. Dr. Hayes? Dr. Immani Hayes? He gushed, his voice slick with corporate damage control. I am David Roth, Trans-American Station Chief for all of LAX. I was in the middle of a briefing. I came as soon as I heard. On behalf of Trans-American Airways, from the bottom of my heart, I am deeply, profoundly, personally sorry for this horrific misunderstanding. Karen Miller, seeing her boss, whimpered. David, Mr. Roth, she was filming. She threatened me. It was a security. Roth spun on her, his panicked smile vanishing, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated venom. Karen, not one more word. Do you understand me? Go to the galley, now. Karen flinched as if struck and stumbled back into the aircraft, tears of rage and terror now streaming down her face. Roth turned back to Immani, his smile snapping back into place. Please, Dr. Hayes, a terrible mistake. A training issue with a senior crew member. Let's fix this right now. We will, of course, get you back on this flight. Seat 1A. Whatever you want. We will comp your flight. We will give you 1,000,000 miles. We will handle Miss Miller and the captain. Please, let's just get you to Seattle. We can put this all behind us. Immani let the desperate, babbling offer hang in the air. She looked at the groveling manager, the trembling flight attendant hiding in the galley, and the utterly broken captain, who was now leaning against the jet bridge wall, his entire career flashing before his eyes. Mr. Roth, Immani said, her voice dropping, forcing them all to lean in. First, I am not setting foot back on that aircraft. Not now. Not ever. I am not getting into a pressurized tube with a man, she nodded at Cole, who has already proven he is willing to eject a passenger in retaliation, based on a flight attendant's lie. My safety is not guaranteed with him at the controls. That ship, quite literally, has sailed. Roth's face tightened. This was not going to be a simple comp the flight fix. Second, Immani continued, her voice gaining power, you will stop calling this a misunderstanding. You will stop calling it an isolated incident. What I witnessed was a pattern. The humiliation of Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez was the pattern, and your purser's immediate, violent, and dishonest reaction to being documented was the practice. This was practice behavior. This was entitlement. This was bigotry enabled by a command structure that never ever questions it. She looked past Roth into the aircraft, and her eyes found the terrified, pale face of Sarah Chen, the junior flight attendant. Ms. Chen, Sarah, please step out here. Sarah looked at Karen, then at the captain, then at Roth. She was frozen. It's all right, Immani said, her voice softening for the first time. You are not in trouble. Come here. Sarah crept onto the jet bridge. Sarah, Immani said, you witnessed the entire incident with the Ramirez family. You witnessed Ms. Miller's comments, and you witnessed her confrontation with me. Is that correct? Sarah, trembling, looked at her bosses, all three of whom were staring at her. She swallowed. Yes, I saw it all. Good, Immani said. Ms. Chen, you are a material witness in a federal investigation. I am giving you my card. You will be contacted by my office. I want to make one thing very, very clear to you and to Mr. Roth. She locked eyes with the station manager. If anyone from Transamerican, if Mr. Roth, Captain Cole, Ms. Miller, or anyone from corporate attempts to intimidate you, change your schedule, cut your hours, discipline you, or retaliate against you in any way for your testimony, that is a separate and distinct federal crime. It is called witness tampering, and I will personally prosecute it. You are protected, Sarah. Do you understand? Sarah looked at Immani, and for the first time, a flicker of resolve entered her eyes. She nodded, standing a little taller. Yes. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good, you may go. Sarah nodded and retreated. Immani turned her full, icy attention back to David Roth. Now, Mr. Roth, here is what happens next. You are going to preserve all evidence. That means the passenger manifest. That means all CCTV footage from Gate 77A and this jet bridge, from 1 hour ago until now. That means all internal communications. And that especially means the crew reports that I am certain Ms. Miller and Captain Cole are already planning to falsify. Of course, Dr. Hayes, absolutely. Whatever you need, Roth said, nodding frantically. And, Immani added, Captain Cole and Ms. Miller are to be immediately removed from duty. Right now, pending this investigation. You can't do that, Cole finally roared, pushing himself off the wall. You don't have that authority. I am the captain. This is my flight. You are interfering. I'm not, Immani said, not even looking at him. I don't have the authority to fire him. But he does, she said, nodding at David Roth. And if he, in Transamerican's legal team, want to show even a shred of good faith and mitigate the mountain of federal and civil liability that is about to fall on their heads, he will. It was a checkmate. Roth knew it. Cole knew it. Roth looked at his captain, his face a grim mask. Rob, Karen, get your bags. You're done. Meet me in my office. Now. David, Cole sputtered, betrayed. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of the airline, Rob, Roth snapped, his patience gone. Get your bags. Karen Miller let out a choked, broken sob and fled into the plane to get her things. Captain Robert Cole just stared at Immani, his eyes filled with a pure, toxic hatred. He was a king who had just been dethroned by an uppity passenger he had tried to crush. He stalked into the cockpit, grabbed his flight bag and hat, and stalked back out. As he passed Immani, he deliberately and violently bumped her shoulder, trying to knock her off balance. Immani didn't move an inch. She stood like a rock. Officer Riley put his hand on his taser. Ma'am? It's fine, officer, Immani said, straightening her jacket. It's all part of the record. Assaulting a federal officer. Add it to the list. Cole froze, the implication of his petty, final act of aggression sinking in. He deflated, and without another word, stormed up the jet bridge and disappeared into the terminal. Mark Jenkins, the gate agent, scurried back, his face ashen. Dr. Hayes, I have you confirmed. Alaska Airlines, Flight 608. It leaves from Terminal 6 in 90 minutes. Seat 1A. I can have a cart take you. I am so sorry. Thank you, Mark, Immani said, finally acknowledging him. A cart won't be necessary. I can walk. She zipped her briefcase. She was ready to leave. The show was over. David Roth, making one last desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding, stepped in front of her. "Dr. Hayes, please," he begged, his voice low. This is a good airline. We employ 50,000 good people. Don't let this one incident define us. We can make this right." Immani stopped. She looked at this man, the embodiment of a corporation that only cared about a problem once it was caught. "Mr. Roth," she said, her voice clear and caring to everyone left on the jet bridge. "The culture of an organization is not defined by the good people who do nothing. It's defined by the worst behavior it is willing to tolerate." She looked past him at the Trans-American logo on the side of the plane. "And today I saw exactly what you tolerate." She turned, her heels clicking, and walked away from the wreckage of Gate 77A, leaving David Roth standing alone in the jet bridge, the full catastrophic weight of her words and her identity crashing down upon him. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. The incident on TAA 417 was not buried. Dr. Immani Hayes was not just a passenger, she was a bulldog. Her report to her boss, Daniel Foster, was not a complaint. It was a proposal for a full pattern and practice investigation into Trans-American Airways, and it was approved. 3 months later, the sterile, wood-paneled conference room at the Trans-American corporate headquarters in Dallas was suffocatingly quiet. On one side of the massive mahogany table sat the airline's executive team, the CEO, Alan Strickland, the general counsel, the VP of in-flight services, and a phalanx of high-priced lawyers from an outside firm. On the other side sat Dr. Immani Hayes, her boss, Daniel Foster, and 2 other DOJ attorneys. The table between them was littered with binders, laptops, and video screens. "Let's be clear about what we've found," Daniel Foster said, his voice a calm, deep rumble. "This was not one bad apple. This was a poisoned orchard." He nodded to Immani. "Exhibit A," Immani said, and a video played on the large screens. It was her video. The audio was crystal clear. They heard Karen Miller's "You people." They heard the audible gasp from another passenger. They heard Karen's fawning over Mr. Stevens. "That video," Immani said, "was the key, but it only unlocked the door." She clicked to the next slide. "We subpoenaed your internal complaints database for the last 3 years. We found 1,834 passenger complaints alleging discrimination based on race, national origin, or religion. Of those, 1,822 were closed with the code passenger non-compliant or crew discretion, with no further action." The general counsel shifted in his seat. Immani continued. "We cross-referenced the crew names. Ms. Karen Miller had 47 such complaints filed against her personally. Captain Robert Cole had 19 for backing crew members in similar disputes. Your airline was not just aware of their behavior, you were actively shielding it." She played another video. This one was airport CCTV footage. It showed Mark Jenkins at the gate, clearly waving white passengers through while stopping and rescreening a disproportionate number of Black and Asian passengers. "We interviewed 65 current and former employees," Immani said, "including Ms. Sarah Chen, whom you illegally fired for performance issues 2 weeks after the incident." Sarah had been immediately rehired, with back pay, as a precondition for this meeting. They described a corporate culture, particularly among senior crew, that prizes authority over service and views minority passengers as inherently more difficult or less valuable than white passengers in premium cabins. The evidence was overwhelming. It was a systemic, undeniable, and deeply rotten culture of discrimination. The CEO, Alan Strickland, finally spoke. What do you want?" Daniel Foster leaned forward. "What we want, Mr. Strickland, is justice. What we are proposing, to avoid a federal lawsuit that would bankrupt you, is a consent decree. The karma, when it landed, was not a single lightning bolt. It was a flood. The karma for Karen Miller, fired. Her union contract was voided due to the severity of her proven misconduct and false reports. She was facing a separate civil suit filed by Arturo and Sofia Ramirez, whose travel was paid for by the DOJ to give their deposition. Blacklisted from every major U.S. carrier, she was last seen working at a duty-free shop at the Charlotte airport. The karma for Captain Robert Cole, fired. The FAA, upon reviewing the DOJ's evidence, opened its own investigation into his willful disregard for passenger rights and safety and his conspiracy to file a false security report. His pilot's license was suspended for 2 years. His career as a commercial captain was over. The karma for Mark Jenkins, fired. He was found to have discriminatory practices in boarding, and his complicity in the cover-up was clear. The karma for Trans-American Airways. This was the hard karma. 1. The fine, a $45 million penalty, the largest civil rights fine ever levied against a U.S. airline. 2. The consent decree, a 5-year court-enforced agreement. The airline was forced to completely scrap its existing customer service and de-escalation training. 3. The new training. A new multi-million-dollar training program designed and overseen by the Department of Justice and independent civil rights experts was mandated for every single employee, from the CEO down to the baggage handlers. 4. The oversight. The airline was forced to hire an independent, court-appointed federal monitor to review all passenger complaints for the next 5 years. This monitor had the power to reopen cases and order disciplinary action, bypassing the airline's internal chain of command. 5. The apology. A public national apology was issued by the CEO to Dr. Immani Hayes and to Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez, admitting to the company's systemic failures. 6 months later, Immani Hayes was at an airport again, this time DCA in Washington, D.C. She was flying to Atlanta for a new case. She walked down the jet bridge, and as she stepped onto the plane, she looked at the name on the fuselage, Trans-American Airways. It was intentional. The DOJ monitor had asked her to fly the airline and report on her experience. She stepped inside. A young black flight attendant at the door saw her boarding pass, and then her face. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. "Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice full of genuine respect. "It is an honor to have you on board. Welcome." Immani smiled, a real, warm smile. "Thank you. It's good to be here." She took her seat, 2B, and as she buckled in, she saw the flight attendant patiently helping an elderly woman put her bag in the overhead bin. He was kind, respectful, and efficient. Immani Hayes opened her laptop, the hum of the engines a familiar lullaby. The work was not over. It would never be. But today, the air in the cabin felt a little lighter. The consequences for Trans-American Airways were devastating, and they were necessary. The investigation triggered by that one video, the one Karen Miller tried to destroy, didn't just cost the airline $45 million. It forced a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of their company culture. It's a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate, the one you dismiss and disrespect, might be the one who holds all the cards. This story shows that karma isn't always instant, but when it lands, especially when backed by the weight of the law, it can be systemic and life-altering. If you were moved by this story of justice, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this with someone who needs to see that change is possible, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We drop new stories of drama and real-life karma every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next.